Canada's homeless crisis. 2025. Out of control. Trauma and system failure by Streetside. Witness tents ripple like bruised flags along Hastings Street, while commuters speed past, windows up. It's 6 a.m. In the queue outside the Salvation Army already snakes around the block, because last November, Canada's single-night count found more than 41,000 neighbors without a bed, up 12% in just 2 years. Zoom out. A national vacancy rate frozen at 1.5%, the lowest since 1988. Average rents leaping 8% in a single year, and a 3.5 million home supply gap projected by 2030. Bus shelters morph into triage wards, library steps double as bedrooms, and the nation's weather app might as well serve as a health warning. If housing is Canada's backbone, the spine just popped. How did the second largest country on Earth run out of room for its own people? Who profits when sidewalks become bedrooms? And what happens when trauma is the rent we charge the poor? Stick with us for the next 14 minutes as we shoulder a camera, a mic, and a measure of outrage to walk the full length of the broken pipeline. From policy desks to pavement cracks. We'll name streets, meet survivors, and hold receipts. Smash that like, slam subscribe, and ring the bell so the algorithm can't look away. Join the journey. Because tonight, we're not rubbernecking, we're bearing witness. 1. The growing tide Canada's rental vacancy slot has shrunk to the width of a keyhole, just 1.5% in 2023, inching up to 2.2% in 2024, yet still the tightest market in almost 4 decades. At the same time, the average 2-bedroom lease shattered the 2,173 Canadian dollar mark, a 6% jump even after record completions. Proof supply is sprinting, but demand is wearing rocket boots. Zoom into the sidewalk census. Toronto's 2024 street. Needs count logged 15,482 neighbors without a fixed address. 1,615 sleeping outdoors despite winter protocols. Vancouver's 2024 count tallied 2,420 people. 605 unsheltered 3/4 reporting a disability. And in the Fraser Valley, the once sleepy city of Chilliwack, shocked officials with 715 people enumerated in its 2024 2-day PT count, nearly double the 2020 figure. The current crests aren't confined to megacities. Lethbridge recorded 522 unhoused residents in 2024, a 15% spike since 2022, while Halifax's by-name list hit 1,155 people this January, eclipsing shelter capacity by 310 beds. These are not isolated puddles. They're tributaries feeding a national flood. Concrete squares once meant for chessboards now host survival economies. A mother sells beadwork beside a discarded office chair. A senior naps beneath a bus shelter ad for luxury condos. Hastings, George, Gottingen, street names become diagnoses. I roll my mat outside Union Station because cameras feel safer than alleys. Murmurs Maria, 38, Toronto, fingers curled around a smoke-blackened kettle. Every decade, we redraw maps. In 2025, we redraw morals. If the pavement looks crowded, it's because the margins ran out of room. Second roots of the crisis? Why is the canoe taking on water faster than we can bail? Start with arithmetic. Canada added more than 1.2 million newcomers in the year to July 2024, an historic high, while purpose-built rentals grew just 2.7%. Basic supply and demand became Jenga. Pull one block, the tower wobbles. Wages tick north. The average hourly pay reached $37.22 Canadian in June 2025. Yet rents sprinted ahead. A median one-bedroom in Vancouver lists for 2,529 Canadian dollars, for a single earner that's roughly 54% of take-home pay, nearly double CMHC's 30% affordability threshold. In Toronto, municipal budget analysts peg the rent-to-income wedge at 43% for market newcomers. Vacancy has little chance to breathe. CMHC projects 1.6% for 2025, essentially unchanged despite the construction surge. Mortgage stress tests keep would-be buyers penned in the rental corral. International students and temporary workers stack demand higher still. Result? 40% of units that turn over see rent hikes above 23%. A landlord's catch-up game that becomes a tenant's eviction notice. Downstream, chronic homelessness entrenches. 27.6% of all shelter users met chronic criteria in 2023, a statistic that reads like scar tissue on system failure. In plainer words, The longer someone stays unhoused, the harder the spreadsheet math is to reverse. So when we ask how the richest G7 nation wound up triaging families in bus shelters, the answer isn't a single villain. It's an overcrowded stage of policy lags, wage drag, and land use gridlock. The math may bore budget committees, but the deficit shows on faces long before it hits ledgers. Ready to flip the calculator with me? The next chapter dives into survival's daily cost, because numbers alone don't feel the cold. 3. Survival's heavy. Cost without locks, survival turns into barter. A phone becomes tonight's dinner. A motel key doubles as protection. It's the oldest exchange rate on the street. Safety for silence. Polaris's National Survivor Study found that 64% of trafficking survivors had already tasted homelessness as kids, making pavement the perfect recruiting ground for predators. Covenant House Toronto's 2024 impact audit sharpened that edge. 68% of youth who'd been trafficked reported sleeping rough when they were lured, and over 30% of the young women they shelter have exchanged sex for food or rent. The Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline fielded crisis calls in 2024, up 22% year over year, an SOS frequency that outpaces funding by a kilometer. Healthcare slides into DIY surgery, peroxide from Dollarama, gauze torn from an old t-shirt. Every untreated abscess or unfilled prescription becomes a future ICU bill the taxpayer can't see. Yet, shelter curfews shove night shift workers back to the curb, overdoses spike on welfare check day. Bad dates get mapped on Telegram in lieu of 911. They said I could charge my phone, then kept the charger as a deposit, remembers Jamal, 17, Scarborough, eyes locked on a cracked skateboard. Women carry pepper spray where a purse should be. Teens memorize which convenience store clerks will let them loiter until sunrise. Every choice is a triage: food or insulin, sleep or surveillance, warmth or invisibility. And when the only doors open after midnight are dealers or Johns, exploitation stops looking like a crime and starts looking like a commute. So ask yourself, if your entire life could fit in a stolen grocery cart, what would you trade to keep it rolling? 4th, community trust, under strain. City soundscapes are changing pitch, from birds and bike bells to sirens and distress calls. In 2023, Toronto diverted 6,827 mental health emergencies to its new community crisis service, and a remarkable 78% were defused with zero police presence. For Cherie, the knock-on effect? The Toronto Police logged a 4.5% drop in person in crisis dispatches the same year. On the Pacific Coast, the tension shows up in inboxes. Vancouver's 311 system logged over 4,500 complaints about tents and street structures in 2023, an average annual rise of 8% since 2018. Each ticket spawns an engineering crew, a fire marshal, sometimes a court injunction, public dollars chasing private despair. To meet crises where they erupt, Vancouver doubled down on its storied CAR 87/88 model, green-lighting hires for 100 new mental health nurses and 100 police officers to staff co-response units citywide. Similar hybrids flicker across the map, from Edmonton's 24/7 PATH teams to Halifax's new mobile mental health vans, but scale remains the sticking point. Critics warned that every cleared encampment simply blooms again a block away, like water pressed from a sponge. Frontline workers call it wakatent. Residents call it exhausting. Trust erodes when bylaws feel like sweepstakes and social workers rotate like shift change. We aren't anti-police, we're anti-roulette. Sighs Officer Patel, CAR 88, adjusting a Kevlar vest over a Narcan pouch. Some nights we play paramedic, therapist, and garbage collector before the paperwork even starts. The calculus is cruelly simple. If 911 remains the default ERP for poverty, both cops and communities stay stuck in a loop of reactive triage. Until the upstream leaks, housing, treatment, income are patched, every siren wail is just another bucket under the ceiling. 5. The weight of dependency. Every addiction stat is a cipher for pain. Federal snapshots show 6 in 10 people who sleep outside also battle substance use disorders, and that's a treatment caseload masquerading as a housing list. In the quiet grid of Canada's rural roots, the crisis hits harder. Opioid-related ER visits jumped 31% between 2021 and 2024, double the urban growth rate. Yet detox geography is destiny. Urban centers hold 11 residential treatment beds per 100K residents. Rural areas limp along at just 4. Picture 2 lifeboats, one with oars, the other with holes. Detox was full, so the nurse handed me a blanket and Narcan, recalls Aiden, 42, Kamloops, and then tracing the scar where an IV should have been. 6 months later, he's mentoring peers under the corrugated roof of a 40-unit recovery village built from shipping containers. Evidence the spiral can reverse. Dependency is never a one-player game. Dealers extend credit with interest paid in exploitation. Small-town pharmacies lock restroom doors. City clinics ration Suboxone because the next shipment is 3 provinces away. Public dollars cover overdose reversals. Staggering 115,000 naloxone kits dispensed in 2024 alone, but beds remain IOUs. So ask yourself, if recovery requires a pillow and a plug-in for your phone, what happens when the only outlet is a dealer's extension cord? 6. System stretched, thin Canada added cots, but the math still buckles. Emergency shelters ran 88.6% full on any given night in 2024. Translation? Most beds are spoken for before sunset. Classrooms feel the strain, too. School boards flagged 42,700 Ontario students without a fixed address last term. That's an attendance sheet the size of a mid-sized town lugging homework between motel rooms. Healing Minds faces a workforce bottleneck. Canada counts 14 psychiatrists per 100K people, well below the OECD median of 19. Rural counties often rely on locums dialing in by video if broadband cooperates. Meanwhile, rent-geared income vouchers are stuck in traffic. Toronto's waitlist ballooned to 93,000 households this spring, the worst in 11 years. Digital gaps turn bureaucracy into a brick wall. 1/3 of low-income applicants lack stable internet to upload tax slips or scan IDs, freezing them at step 1. Picture filling out a 30-page online form on free library Wi-Fi, timed to cut off at 9 p.m. Then starting over tomorrow. Shelter staff call it fog of forms. Parents call it missed meals. And every unchecked box queues another night in a minivan or stairwell. We ask governments to be parachutes, yet too often they're mazes. Until capacity, connectivity, and human bandwidth line up, Canada's safety net will keep tearing where it's stretched thinnest. 7. Policy and public disconnect. The money is real. Toronto steers 7 cents of every tax-supported dollar, 904 million Canadian dollars in 2025, into shelters and housing. Across the Rockies, British Columbia penciled in 2.4 billion Canadian dollars, 4.9% of its entire operating budget, for housing initiatives this fiscal year. Ottawa's Rapid Housing Initiative, WAVM 3, kicked in another 1.5 billion Canadian dollars nationwide. On spreadsheets, it looks like a down payment on utopia, yet the pavement keeps contradicting PowerPoints. Vancouver's April 2024 blitz on East Hastings scraped 200 tents in 48 hours. Crews filled dumpsters, but rain-soaked nylon sprouted again 2 blocks east by week's end. Toronto's interdivisional protocol. Revised 2024, still green lights encampment evictions after 14 days' notice. Sorbort Saporwanam, even when beds are already at 95% capacity. Each sweep writes a bill. Policing overtime, fencing, storage fees, lawsuits. The city paid 2.3 million Canadian dollars in damages to evicted campers last year alone. Voters approve vacancy taxes, Toronto at 3%, Vancouver at 5%. But developers cite interest rate shock, cranes stall, pipelines clog. Only 38% of lots hit with Toronto's new tax moved to active construction within a year. Meanwhile, public hearings on 4-story missing middle zoning last longer than some leases. Council talks millions and my street feels -1 porte potty, snorts Celia, homeowner near Trinity Bellwoods, pointing to a muddy rectangle where an encampment outhouse once stood. Policy is a compass, lived reality is the map. Right now, they don't overlay. Until bylaws measure success by fewer tents, not faster evictions, the budget line remains a boomerang, flung with flair, circling back to the same sidewalks. 8. Building bridges through compassion. Where bureaucracy stalls, neighbors jury-rig hope. In Vancouver, Lavame YVR's shower bus dispenses 120 hot showers each week. Soap, towels, and a playlist that drowns traffic. The driver greets everyone by name. Dignity boards first. Heat domes rewrite survival manuals. During July's 43 degrees Celsius scorcher, Toronto's Metro Hall Rotunda morphed into a 24/7 cooling center, logging 1,300 visits in 7 days. Volunteers lugged dog bowls, glucose monitors, and a phone-charging octopus of power bars. Outside, paramedic calls for heat stroke still jumped 19%, but dozens credited the cold marble floors for their pulse. Not all fixes roll on wheels or marble. In Ottawa, a network of 14 community fridges now rescues 1.2 tons of food each month. Restaurant surplus becomes family dinner, no forms required. Calgary's Bear Clan Patrol hands out 500 harm reduction kits every Friday. Halifax Library's pilot care cards, Tupanarinaoits, are the free library card that doubles as a stored value transit pass, good for 10 rides a month. Neva 23, shower bus volunteer. When the water hits 42 degrees Celsius, you see shoulders drop, like someone turned the volume down on Panic. Her shifts started as a school credit, stayed as a calling. Each microprogram plugs one leak: hygiene, hydration, calories, connection. String them together and you have a patchwork raft sturdy enough for a night, sometimes a season. Grassroots doesn't replace government, but it often outruns it. The challenge is scale without losing soul. Can the handshake survive the spreadsheet? That question drives us next to faith crews, art collectives, and sober homes, where belonging is policy and compassion is currency. Join the journey. The light gets brighter from here. 9. Community-led light in the darkness. When bricks and mortar lag, compassion rewrites blueprints. On Toronto's outskirts, Pilgrim Feast Tabernacle seeded its sanctuary to roll out cots, sheltering about 1,000 refugee claimants over 7 months before zoning fines shuttered the experiment. The choir loft became a coat room. Stained glass saints doubled as nightlights, proof you can kneel in a house at the same time. Faith collectives aren't alone. Peer-run sober homes. Level 1 democracies. Thanks Gen with no paid staff. Bothra reports 68% resident abstinence at 6 and 12-month follow-up. No clinicians, just chore charts, house vote, and a fridge magnet that reads, "Progress, not perfection." Residents police the coffee filters and each other's cravings, and the data say it works. Art steps in where sermons leave off. Ottawa's Paint It Up program paid youth honoraria to cloak plywood and graffiti scars with color, drawing 45 street-involved artists into a single 150-foot mural outside Options housing last summer. One teenager signed his panel, "Dignity Lives Here," then asked to keep the leftover brushes for a shelter art club. Layla, 19, Ottawa. "They said we were at risk. Now tourists Instagram our wall. Feels like we rezoned ourselves into the world." Belonging isn't a budget line, but it is a ROI multiplier. Nastena, shared meals cut relapse. Shared walls cut tagging. And when pews morph into bunks or plywood into hope, the city grid gains square footage of dignity, no building permit required. 10. A future worth fighting for. We've walked Queen West's rain-lashed tents, heard Jamal trade a charger for safety, watched Aiden flip his relapse into mentorship. 3 threads, 1 loom. Housing is the hardware of recovery, community the software. So where do we aim the spotlight? First scale permanent supportive housing. Fast track 15,000 modular units by 2027. Analysts peg the upfront at 4.3 billion Canadian dollars, but note every chronic homeless bed avoided saves, ER, policing, and shelter outlays. Part of the approximately 10 billion Canadian dollars Canada already spends yearly just coping. 2. Top up the Canada Housing Benefit. Auto-index rent supports so no household pays more than 30% of local median income. Adjusted quarterly, not yearly, so inflation can't evict families before paperwork lands. 3. Crisis first responders everywhere. Fund civilian mental health teams, a la Toronto's TCCS, at 1 unit per 100K residents, letting police step back and wellness step forward. The maths pencil out. Policy only leaps when hearts lean in. Volunteer for a shower bus shift. Email your counselor before the next encampment vote. Smash that share button so algorithms can't bury human faces. Because homelessness is called a housing crisis, but it has always been a human one, and humans built it, which means humans can end it. Join the journey. Let's stitch those margins back into the map.